I am Lorenzo FatCat Nichols. Born on December 25, 1958, in Birmingham, Alabama, I found my way to the bustling streets of New York City during the tumultuous 1980s. My rise to infamy stemmed from my control over a vast drug empire in Queens, where family ties ran deep within my organization. My moniker, Fat Cat, came from my imposing physical presence, a linebacker-thick neck, a head that seemed to dwarf those around me, and a distinctive, rugged beard. I owe my beginnings to the streets of Alabama, raised by my maternal grandmother until I ventured north to Queens at the age of 10, joining my mother and her third husband. Formal education was a luxury I couldn't afford, dropping out before even reaching the 9th grade. Instead, I found camaraderie in the 7 Crown Street gang, where I began to sow the seeds of my criminal enterprise. I am Lorenzo FatCat Nichols. Born on December 25, 1958, in Birmingham, Alabama, I found my way to the bustling streets of New York City during the tumultuous 1980s. My rise to infamy stemmed from my control over a vast drug empire in Queens, where family ties ran deep within my organization. My moniker, Fat Cat, came from my imposing physical presence, a linebacker-thick neck, a head that seemed to dwarf those around me, and a distinctive, rugged beard. I owe my beginnings to the streets of Alabama, raised by my maternal grandmother until I ventured north to Queens at the age of 10, joining my mother and her third husband. Formal education was a luxury I couldn't afford, dropping out before even reaching the 9th grade. Instead, I found camaraderie in the 7 Crown Street gang, where I began to sow the seeds of my criminal enterprise. Brian, Glaze, Gibbs and Joseph, Mike Bones, Rogers were trusted allies, as was Howard, Pappy, Mason, a friend I met during my time behind bars. Big Mac's Deli served as the nerve center of my operations, a business I and my wife Joanne inherited from her father. But on July 29, 1985, law enforcement raided the deli, catching me red-handed with firearms and a stash of cash and drugs. Though I managed to secure bail, I found myself back in custody after violating parole, a situation that fueled my anger and ultimately led to the tragic demise of my parole officer, Brian Rooney, in October 1985. While I never intended for Rooney to be killed, my actions had dire consequences, leading to my indictment on charges of second-degree murder. From within the confines of prison, I continued to exert control over my drug empire, dispensing ruthless justice to those who crossed me. I admit to ordering the deaths of 2 individuals, including Isaac Bolden in 1986 and my former girlfriend Myrtle Maisha Horsham in December 1987. Horsham's betrayal, squandering my money on another, sealed her fate in my eyes. Even my own family faced perilous threats, with my wife being kidnapped for ransom in May 1987, and my mother's home being firebombed the following year, resulting in the tragic death of my half-sister Mary. Despite the mounting legal troubles and personal tragedies, I found myself convicted on multiple drug and weapons charges in January 1988, receiving a harsh sentence of 25 years to life in prison.
Mary Nichols, a perpetrator, fired 16 rounds from a semi-automatic weapon at the front of the 3-story home a little after 12:30 a.m. He then proceeded to throw a bomb through one of the ground floor windows before fleeing in a gray Bic sedan with 3 accomplices who'd remained in the car. Mary, who was wheelchair-bound as a result of a stroke years earlier, was discovered by firefighters in a bedroom on the 2nd floor of the house. Her 10-year-old son, Winnell Nichols, was transported to Jamaica Hospital before being taken to New York Hospital for treatment of 2nd and 3rd-degree burns on his face and both arms. Mary's daughters, Tamika Nichols and Ida Nichols, fled the house unharmed. Nichols' 70-year-old mother, Louise Coleman, and his stepfather, Amos Coleman, also escaped without injury after unsuccessfully attempting to pull Mary to safety at the time of the fire. Nichols was incarcerated at the Shawangunk Correctional Facility located near Kingston, New York. On August 11, 1988, a federal task force comprised of 400 agents conducted raids on homes in 3 states in the most wide-ranging response to Officer Byron's murder. 6 months prior, Louise Coleman, who was accused of making drug sales, and Amos Coleman were arrested in Birmingham. Joanne Nichols was arrested in Norfolk, Virginia. Mason's mother, Claudia Mason, was arrested as well. Nichols himself was arrested in his cell at the Wallkill Correctional Facility. Mason was also arrested while serving time in upstate New York. 5 buildings, including Louise Coleman's home, loaded machine guns, cash, heroin, and cocaine, were all seized during the sweep. Gibbs, who was also arrested on August 11th, was apprehended on drug trafficking charges by federal agents at a McDonald's restaurant in South Carolina. Seeking leniency, Gibbs agreed to cooperate against Nichols. Though he pleaded guilty to 5 murders and 2 attempted murders, he served less than 10 years in prison. Gibbs did his time at the federal facility located in Otisville, New York, and FCI Sandstone, a low-security prison in Minnesota. Following Viola Nichols' arrest, she eventually pleaded guilty as part of a deal with prosecutors that required her to cooperate against her brother. She was entered into the federal witness protection program for her safety. In July of 1989, Viola testified in open court against Claudia Mason and Bebo's third-in-command, Char Shoka Davis, both charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine base. As a consequence, Davis was convicted and subsequently sentenced to 33 years in federal prison by Judge Edward Corman in 1990. On September 28, 1989, Nichols pleaded guilty to 2 counts of racketeering-related murder in connection to the deaths of Bolden and Horsham. As part of a plea agreement with federal prosecutors, Nichols gave testimony explaining his role in the killings in the chambers of Federal District Court Judge Edward Corman. The agreement also required that he cooperate against members of his organization, including Mason. Nichols was already serving a 25-year-to-life sentence stemming from drug convictions in state court. In 1992, Nichols pleaded guilty to ordering Rooney's murder and was sentenced to a term of 25 years to life in prison for his role in the crime. He was also given a 40-year sentence in connection with federal racketeering, murder, and narcotics convictions. At its peak, Nichols' organization generated $20 million annually in drug sales. A 2-year criminal investigation nicknamed Operation Roadrunner exposed both Nichols and convicted Detroit drug trafficker Richard Whiteboy, where she on involvement in an auto theft ring which had sold over 250 Florida vehicles to 14 other states from 1990.
In 1992, I pleaded guilty to the murder charges related to Rooney's death, earning an additional 25 years to life behind bars. Concurrently, I faced federal charges for drug-related crimes and racketeering, resulting in a 40-year sentence. Cooperation with authorities led to a lighter sentence, a decision motivated by a desire to mitigate the consequences for my loved ones embroiled in my criminal activities. Now, I reside within the confines of the New York State Corrections System, reflecting on my past misdeeds and offering sincere apologies to the victims of my actions. Time behind bars has provided ample opportunity for introspection, though the consequences of my choices continue to reverberate.
2005, grossing $8 million in the process. Nichols pleaded guilty to racketeering for his role in the scheme. In December of 2006, Nichols, who along with Wexie was incarcerated in Florida and in the Witness Protection Program, received a 10-year sentence after confessing to heading the ring. In March of 2010, Nichols became eligible for parole. However, he declined to appear before the board. Nichols was eventually granted parole after a February 23, 2022 hearing, and was released from state custody on April 5 and placed in federal custody, the State Department of Corrections and Community Service said in a statement. The feared drug lord's federal conviction on drug and murder racketeering convictions runs until 2026. As of that date, some feared that parole from his state sentence could see him out soon. A retired detective who worked on the Barn case said it would be outrageous if Nichols were let go. His crew was responsible for the murder of Officer Edward Byrne, the detective said. Police officers who dealt with Nichols and his crew in the 1980s said he wasn't meant to breathe freely one day. He was one of the biggest crack drug dealers in the late 80s. He is responsible for hundreds of deaths, either from murder or drug overdoses. He has not paid his debt to the company, said a retired Queens officer. Lynch said the move was an insult to Byrne's family. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, which prosecuted Nichols, declined to comment.